consensus where there's two elements of what's required for a functioning democracy in America. One is secure elections, and the second is a peaceful transfer of power. When those things come into conflict, that's an opportunity for heroism. Here's what I would have said. We need single-day voting on election day. We need paper ballots, and we need government-issued ID matching the voter file. And if we achieve that, then we have achieved victory, and we should not have any further complaint about election integrity.
So what would you have done
through the Senate?
So what would you have done with Mike Pence? You would have not certified the election?
So in my capacity as president of the Senate, I would have led through that level of reform. Then on that condition, certified the election results, served it up to the president, President Trump, then to sign that into law, and on January 7th, declared the re-election campaign pursuant to a free and fair election. I think that was a missed opportunity, but that's the kind of spirit we're going to need to unite this country rather than sweeping those concerns under the rug.
11 months ago, in your book, which wasn't written that long ago, you wrote, the fact that all of our governmental institutions so unanimously found no evidence of significant fraud is telling. Furthermore, I've talked to many Republicans at all levels of government, and not one has ever presented convincing evidence that the 2020 election was stolen from President Trump. Very few have seriously tried. I don't believe that most Republican politicians actually think the election was stolen. So you went from there, and 11 months later, your views have changed on January 6th. Again, this book was written September of 2022.
Chuck, I'm happy to address that if you're interested. Yeah, so and read exactly that chapter in the book. I drew a sharp distinction between what I did see as the interference in the election that mattered, which was interference by big tech. I'm data-driven. There's hard data showing that many voters, many independent voters, would have changed their result enough to influence the outcome of the election if they had been exposed to what we now know to be the truth about the Hunter Biden laptop story. By contrast, I've also been clear. I have not yet seen evidence that there was ballot fraud of a scale that would have changed that result. I'm just responding to data on both fronts. But the fact of the matter is, if we're looking at reuniting this country, there are serious concerns on both sides, but especially on the right, about the concern of elections and election interference and ballot fraud, but also big tech interference. And there's a very clear result and way we can address that. I've offered a clear consensus that everybody can get behind. It is practical. And if people really think that debating this issue is a threat to our democracy, that should be an easy consensus to be able to rally around, and that's how I'll lead as president.
First of all, you never talked about the tech stuff in your book. This is a new thing.
It's not false, Chuck.
You have not talked about this Hunter Biden
Nation of Victims
aspect of it. We were looking
Chuck,
for it.
I think you have not read Nation. I think you have not read Nation of Victims. Literally read the book. There was about 20 pages of content devoted to this, and I also bring it up in the book.
About election fraud that way.
It's fine, but you don't have an obligation to read my book. But if you do, quote it correctly.
We have been, and let me quote it again. You're referring to Republicans. We use stolen election theories as a backdoor to embracing our own victim identity path, pursuing an easy path to power. Throughout this entire book, you mock the entire January 6th aspect. You absolutely criticize Donald Trump for being a sore loser. You write about it in a way of making your point that we've become a nation of victims. And right now on TV, you're doing the exact opposite.
I'm not, Chuck, actually want to be very clear. I preached to conservative audiences I was in Iowa over the last 2 days, and what do I tell them? We're not going to be victims. We're going to be victorious. Whether I'm talking to the left or the right, I say the same thing. I've also been very clear, Chuck, and I want to be clear today, that I would have made very different judgments than Donald Trump did that day and on many of the matters in his path out of office. But there's a difference between a bad judgment and a crime. And what I've been clear about is when we criminalize those bad judgments, that's an abuse of the justice system. It undermines trust not only in our elections, but in our justice system. We have to be able to draw those distinctions. And I do think, Chuck, it's going to take that kind of leader who can actually preach truth to both tribes in this country to reunite this country. So did Donald Trump make all the right judgments? No, I said so then, I say so now. Was that illegal and should we criminalize it? Absolutely not. But I want to lead this nation forward. That is my goal, not to look in the rearview mirror. And in order to do that, I think on the election integrity issue, we have an opportunity to put this debate behind us by single-day voting on election day as a national holiday with paper ballots and government-issued ID. This should not be controversial. And if that helps reunite this country, as I believe it will, that's exactly how I must lead as president, and that's my commitment.
All right, again, from your book, No One Likes a Sore Loser. That's one of the worst victimhood complexes of all. Are you referring to Donald Trump?
I referred in that chapter both to Stacey Abrams and to Donald Trump. And I think that the answer is we need leaders who ultimately stand for victory over victimhood. We did have a victimhood culture that started on the left in this country, the oppression hierarchy. My worry, Chuck, is that that can spread to the right. And the way that this so-called culture war will end is not with a bang, but with a whimper, where each side imitates the methods of the other. That related even to some of our earlier conversation on seeing each other based on the color of our skin. I think that is deeply divisive. What we need in this country is to revive the shared ideals that unite all of us as Americans. The pursuit of excellence, meritocracy, free speech, the rule of law. I genuinely believe, Chuck, that most Americans, regardless of black or white, red or blue, share these ideals in common, and that's what I'm reviving.
I understand that, but again, let me go back to quoting you. The Republican Party seems to be moving towards the position that any races it wins are legitimate, and any it loses were stolen. It's just the preferred conservative brand of victimhood, a knee-jerk kind of sword losing, more common to playground than great republics. You seem to, at the time you wrote your book, believe this was potentially damaging to the rule of law. This was not a way to have a democracy thrive. And you're now speaking in a way that gives essentially a permission slip to election deniers to believe there's some truth to something that you yourself have yet to find evidence of.
Chuck, I stand by everything I said. That was a book where 11 of the 12 chapters were dedicated to a lot of left-wing victimhood in this country, but it would have been incomplete for me not to call out my own tribe. And my point is, I don't want to see this in terms of red versus blue. We've created an incentive structure in this country, whoever you are, whatever your skin color, increasingly whatever your political affiliation, to see yourself as a victim. I refuse to see myself as a victim. Hardship is not the same thing as victimhood. We are going through hardship as a country right now, including many conservatives. Hardship is sometimes not a choice. Victimhood is a choice. And so whoever the American is that I'm talking to, I say we do not choose victimhood. We choose victory. That is who we are. And I think we can be stronger on the other side of it. So, Chuck, this isn't some game of gotcha. I stand by everything I've written over the last 3 years in the books that I have, except for a few areas on facts where, as the new facts have come up, I've changed my mind. But in the core theses, I'm in the exact place I am as when I wrote those books. But the point of the matter is, I'm not in this race to lead a political party. I am in this race to lead a nation. I'm using the Republican Party as a vehicle to advance an America First agenda that I think many Americans, most Americans, can rally behind. That's what we're going to need.
One thing I want to clear up. I know you've only voted in 2 presidential elections. Where did you vote in 2020, and how did you vote?
I voted in Ohio, and during the coronavirus pandemic, I voted by mail. That's exactly how I voted. And you know what? And the fact of the matter is, I think we should have one standard for everybody. But for me, for much of my 20s, I was disaffected from politics. The fact of the matter is, I understand why young people are disaffected. I was uninspired by John Kerry and George Bush. I voted Libertarian that year, or by John McCain and Barack Obama, or Mitt Romney or Barack Obama. So I don't make any bones about that. I actually talk about it in my speeches.
And you're also uninspired by Donald Trump in 2016, right?
I was skeptical of Donald Trump in 2016. That is accurate, because I had grown up in a generation where I felt like we had been lied to. From weapons of mass destruction in Iraq to the 2008 financial bailouts, those are Republican examples, to Democrat examples of the Russia collusion hoax. So I was deeply skeptical, but I judged based on results, and I voted for him with confidence in 2020.
Vivek Ramaswamy, like I said, you became the center of the debate. We will be following your campaign as it goes on. Be safe on the trail, and thanks for coming on and sharing your views.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it.
When we come back, what is the Biden second-term agenda? Senator Bernie Sanders, President Biden's chief rival in 2020, joins me next with his thoughts on what issues he wants Democrats to be running on. Welcome back. Back in April, Senator Bernie Sanders, who of course was Biden's chief rival in the 2020 Democratic primaries, ruled out a third presidential bid and endorsed Biden for re-election. But on Saturday, Sanders was back in New Hampshire, one of those early presidential states where he won both the 2016 and 2020 primaries, to share what he called his concrete agenda for the future of the Democratic Party at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. Of course, when you go to New Hampshire, it sparks some speculation about his own political future.
It is no secret that I want Joe Biden to be re-elected president. If that is going to happen, if we are going to defeat creeping authoritarianism and right-wing extremism, there has got to be an ideological change, of course.
The independent senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, joins me now. Senator Sanders, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you for having me.
So, the fact that you felt the need to do this, should we read into the fact that you don't believe there's a second-term agenda yet that Americans can wrap their head around for what a second Biden term would look like?
No. I think what you can read into that is that Biden has every right to be proud of a long series of accomplishments. You know, 2.5, 3 years ago, this country was in the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression because of COVID. Today, unemployment is all of 3%. We're gaining new jobs, rebuilding manufacturing. We've invested in the infrastructure. We're making progress, and Biden has a right to be proud of that. The point of my remarks is that you cannot simply, as President of the United States, rest on your laurels. What you have got to understand is that today, for structural reasons that have gone on for decades, tens and tens of millions of people are struggling to put food on the table. They can't afford healthcare. They can't afford prescription drugs. They can't afford housing. They can't afford childcare. And meanwhile, in the midst of all of that, you have incredible corporate greed, and the billionaire class has never done better. So my message yesterday for the Democrats, not just for the president, is if you want to do well in this election, talk to the needs of the American people, have the guts to take on the big money interests who have so much power.
It sounds like you don't think the phrase finish the job is something to rally around, that there needs to be more than that.
Yes, you need to recognize that not only have we accomplished a great deal in Biden's first 3 years, and he deserves credit for that, but there are so many long-term problems that this country is facing. Does anybody in America think that our healthcare system is working? And yet the insurance companies make tens of billions of dollars, drug companies make tens of billions of dollars. We don't have enough doctors, nurses, mental health providers, pharmacists, dentists. So we need fundamental reform in healthcare. And by the way, the existential issue of our time is whether or not we address climate change. And we have made some steps forward, but there is no question in my mind if we're going to provide, allow our kids and grandchildren to live in a healthy planet, we've got a lot more to do.
Do you think there'd be a robust discussion on this on the left if there were a competitive primary? Do you think there should be?
Well, I think in this particular time, this particular moment in American history, when we're taking on somebody, the former president, who in fact does not believe in democracy, he's an authoritarian, and a very, very dangerous person. I think at this moment, there has got to be a unification of progressive people in general all over this country, people who are prepared to make sure that women control their own body, that we deal with climate change, that we represent the needs of the working class of this country and take on the billionaire class.
One way that you make it clear that age isn't a factor with you is you're pretty energetic. We see you travel the country. You show up on, you do interviews. It is clearly an issue for many voters when it comes to President Biden. He's a year younger than you. Do you have advice to him on how he should assuage those concerns in the public about his age?
Look, when people look at a candidate, whether it's Joe Biden or Trump or Bernie Sanders, anybody else, they have to evaluate a whole lot of factors. I met with the president, 5 or 6 weeks ago. We had a great discussion. He seemed fine to me. But I think at the end of the day, what we have got to ask ourselves is, what do people stand for? Do you believe that women have a right to control their own bodies? Well, the president has been strong on that. Do you think that climate change is real? Or do you agree with the Republicans that it's a non-issue? Do you think we should raise the minimum wage? Do you think we should reform and take on the pharmaceutical industry? So age is an issue, Chuck, but there are a lot of broader issues than just that.
Let me ask you about Cornel West. He was a co-chair of your campaign in 2020. He's flirting with a Green Party bid for president. The numbers tell the story between 2016 and 2020. You can directly correlate the two third-party candidates, their collective total. That was the difference between Biden winning states and Clinton losing those key states. Are you trying to discourage Cornel West from running?
Well, I've known Cornel for many, many years. He's a very independent-minded guy. He will do what he wants to do. I just think, again, I think Cornel or anybody else can play an important role now about raising issues that are not always discussed. But at the end of the day, I think the progressive community in general and the American people have got to make a decision as to whether we stand for democracy or authoritarianism, or whether or not we're going to represent working-class families.
One of your chief political advisors is concerned that Cornel West is being taken advantage of by maybe people that simply want his name on the ballot. Do you have those concerns?
I really haven't followed it that closely.
All right, Bernie Sanders, the independent senator from Vermont, who we saw in New Hampshire yesterday. Thanks for coming on and sharing your views with us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
When we come back, the Republican presidential hopefuls tried to make the case for why they're the best alternative to Donald Trump. But the Republican voters really want an alternative. Panelists next. Welcome back. Panel is here. Former Democratic Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy of Florida. Marcos Melitzis, the founder of the Daily Kos. Former Republican Governor Pat McCrory of North Carolina. And Daniel Pletka, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Well, let me start with the visual that I think will live for quite some time, and that is the show of hands on Donald Trump. Let's play it again.
If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
Danny Pletka, it was a moment, especially like cascaded like a wave. And it was sort of like the most enthusiastic was Vivek. That's not surprising. And then everybody else, it was this reluctance.
Well, there was that Christie weird hand signal thing. And look, I do see it slightly differently because they all went onto that stage having made a pledge that they would support the party's nominee.
Never did say that they had to support a convicted felon in that pledge.
The party's nominee, there's no asterisk there that says he can't have a mugshot, right? So I feel for them in the sense that they were sort of like, none of them wanted to raise their hand except Vivek, right? None of them wanted to, but I think they all felt like they had to.
How did Vivek end up the center of attention? I don't understand that game theory because leaving DeSantis alone seemed to be, if you're everybody else truly trying to actually get to Trump, you have to go through DeSantis.
I'm a big Eagles fan, and their famous song, The New Kid in Town, it applies in politics too. And he's the new kid in town, and he wants to get as much attention as possible. And he'll say and do anything to get that attention. And he fulfilled that objective. But he also had some previous new kids in town who now have some maturity, some political maturity, like Chris Christie, Pence, and also Nikki Haley. And they went, we're not going to put up with this. And that was a tough debate decision because the more they jump on him, the more attention he gets. But they drew him out. I mean, he's almost, from a foreign policy perspective, he's the Neville Chamberlain. He's not Ronald Reagan.
Well, but are they drawing him out, or were they really trying to attack Donald Trump?
He's asking for a revolution.
Right? No. Was this the other candidates? Because the equivalent of punching your couch cushion, you can't attack Donald Trump, so they're going to attack Vivek.
Oh, that's an interesting theory. I actually hadn't thought about that. I don't think most of them wanted to attack him. I think he just got on their nerves. He was so freaking obnoxious. He looked so wild, biting at their ankles, and he finally couldn't take it anymore. Who is this? I mean, can you imagine somebody who admitted he hadn't even thought about foreign policy until 6 months ago, mansplaining to Nikki Haley, who was the UN ambassador, about foreign policy? I mean, they just couldn't help themselves. That's what I think.
Stephanie, what did you say?
I think that he embodied exactly what the Harvard University calls him the section guy. Josh Barrow wrote about this. He's the guy who speaks in class incessantly but doesn't say anything of merit or of substance, and everybody can't stand him, but they kind of have to still be on his good side because one day he's going to be running for public office, and here he is running for president.
Danny, what's it say that this guy successfully hacked his way into the center stage of the party this easily? Just that the information ecosystem just sort of olayed him to center stage?
I think that is exactly the right question to ask. And look, I have a Vivek-style answer, a glib answer for you. Look, everything has become like reality TV. This is how we ended up with the guy who kept saying, "You're fired," and everybody was like,
So he's
"Oh
a
my God."
Kardashian.
Exactly. There's no accountability in politics, right? He can say whatever he wants, and if he said something different the day before, no one cares because he's there and he believes
entertaining you in the moment.
and he's entertaining you exactly in the moment.
He told everyone.
But some voters did want to see some toughness. Look what happened. A lot of times candidates want to tell us, "Oh, nobody asked us about Trump on the trail." Here's Tim Scott on the trail being asked by a Republican about Donald Trump. Watch this.
You're not standing toe-to-toe with somebody who you don't accept as
we
president.
actually disagree on the foundation, the premise of the question, the problem. And the premise of the question is, why don't you stand up to Trump? You're just wrong that I don't. That's
I never heard you. I didn't hear you the other night stand up and say, I can't accept him as president.
Do you want to have a conversation or do you want to have a monologue? I'm happy to listen, but if you want to have a dialogue, I'll be speaking as well.
Pat, that escalated quickly. I was stunned that Tim Scott sort of almost went after the voter. The voter didn't seem like he was being angry.
He knew he was being filmed, and he also knew he didn't want to irritate the Trump base.
Wow.
And listen, I'm an example of that. I had a 30-point lead at one time in the U.S. Senate race, and the minute Trump went against me, I dropped. That's the power of Donald Trump. And the interview you did earlier with the new kid in town, he's talking about a revolution. While in the same interview, he also said he's going to change the tone. I mean, that's within 48 hours.
Stephanie, you represented one of the swingiest districts of the country. What are people hearing?
Well, one, I think that was like a mistake. I mean, you never engage with your voters that way on camera or not. I mean, that's just like a rookie mistake in engaging with voters. But in a swing district, I think they are really wondering why we're faced with these two options. And this debate was sort of separate from what the presumptive nominations are going to be for both parties. We're a country of 300 million people, and we don't have better alternatives.
I want to bring up one other thing about our Iowa poll that was stunning, because I think it tells us the way the Republican Party has changed. Let me show you what the makeup of the Iowa caucus, the Republican caucus electorate was in 2016. It was 50-50 slight advantage male, 52%, 48%. According to our poll that we released this week, the likely Republican electorate is now 61% male, 39% female. This is the Trump effect. Whatever we want to talk about it, this appears to be the Trump effect, does it not, Danny?
Well, that more men are turning out, but I think it's interesting that you don't have any breakdown there, so I don't know
No,
what
it
the
is
racial
smaller.
makeup. I don't know what the racial
It's the same.
makeup
This is Iowa. It's all the same except for gender. Everything else is the same on ideology and college education. We are seeing more men identify as Republicans and more women not.
Well, that's something that the Republican Party needs to deal with, because there are a lot of women in this country.
And we just had the summer of Barbie and Taylor Swift tour. I mean, women are having a moment in this country where they have an economic impact. They are having a voice, and they're going to want to go to the polls and reflect that.
That's why I thought Nikki Haley did a good job in presenting that face.
She potentially has room to grow if she can somehow get women to show up.
So there's a lot of, everybody's afraid of going after Trump, right? But if you look at primary polling, Trump's around 52%. Half of the party isn't aboard. Now, if there's 10 people splitting the rest of the vote, that's a problem. But if you can consolidate.
Well, you have allowed me to tease really well to our data download. When we come back, there is a divide in the Republican Party among voters who believe President Biden was legitimately elected and those who still believe Donald Trump's lies. We're going to show you what we learned from that split inside the Republican electorate in Iowa. Data download is next. Welcome back. It's data download time. There are a lot of ways to try to understand the 2024 Republican primary electorate, but we got some new data that suggests one of the more crucial splits may be between those Republicans who believe Donald Trump won the 2020 election and those who don't believe and actually acknowledge that the former president lost. Let me show you here. It's almost a pretty even split. Barely a majority believe Donald Trump's false assertions. 41% of Iowa Republican caucus goers do not believe Donald Trump's claims. And you know what? It leads to some interesting splits. Your favorability of Donald Trump depends on whether you believe him. Those that believe him, 92% favorable rating. Those that don't believe him, just 30% have a favorable rating here. As you can see, DeSantis, Scott, and Ramaswamy all have more evenly divided favorable ratings among both groups. In theory, they might be able to unify the two groups. Donald Trump, not so much. Shows you a potential way to build a coalition. Look at the divide between these two groups. Again, 51-41 here. Gun enthusiasts, much more likely to be a gun enthusiast if you're in the believe category, 43% not believe. Religious affiliation, more devoutly religious, those that believe Donald Trump's lies. You're more likely to be moderate if you don't believe Donald Trump's lies about the election. And as you can see here, the biggest divide among those that believe and don't believe, your college education status. Nearly 60% have a bachelor's degree among those that do not believe Trump's false assertions. And it also leads to some interesting splits on some key issues. Use of military at the border, gender-affirming care ban for minors, as you can see here, significant divides. But among the most significant might be the idea of more aid for Ukraine. Just a quarter of those that believe Trump's lies support more aid for Ukraine. Over half who do not believe Trump's lies support more aid for Ukraine. So as you follow this primary season, keep track of those that believe the election lies of Donald Trump and those that don't inside the Republican electorate. Monday will mark the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, where nearly 250,000 Americans gathered on the National Mall in the fight for civil rights. Some know the event best as the day Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech, where he brought attention to race relations, police brutality, and voting rights. Many of the same issues we're still dealing with today. 3 days ahead of the march, Dr. King responded to some of his critics right here on Meet the Press.
I'm sure that many whites, both North and South, have the feeling that we are pushing things too fast and that we should cool off a while, slow up for a period. I cannot agree with this at all, for I think there can be no gainsaying of the fact that the Negro has been extremely patient. We have waited for well now 345 years for our basic constitutional and God-given rights. And we still confront the fact that we are at the bottom of the economic ladder. I think instead of slowing up, we must push at this point and we must continue to move on. And I'm convinced that our moving on will not only help the Negro cause, so to speak, but the cause of the whole of America, because the shape of the world today just doesn't permit our nation the luxury of an anemic democracy.
Those words may be 60 years old, but they have an impact today. When we come back, who has more to lose? A third-party candidate jumps into the presidential race. Panel's next. Welcome back. So let's look at a Biden general election campaign and this idea of a third party. Pat, you are a big part of No Labels. You guys are recruiting candidates. What is this ticket going to look like? And is this a 100% commitment that there's going to be a ticket from No Labels?
Well, Nikki Haley in the debate confirmed that 65% of the people are disgusted with both Trump and Biden being our only choices. They're asking, isn't America better than this? Can't we have a better choice? And the momentum, the movement of No Labels is on fire right now. People are looking for another.
I get that people don't want.
And I know. Wait a minute. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of.
No, they're not.
There are a lot of people. I'm telling you right now. There are a lot of people who predicted Trump would never be president. Are the same people who are saying there's no way in hell a third party can win. I'm telling you, we've never had 65% of the people disgusted.
So No
with both
Label
parties.
is literally a movement that says we stand for nothing. Imagine going to Walmart or Target and seeing No Labels on
You
the
haven't
products.
read obsolete
Products
30
are
issue
problem.
statements.
No, here.